Hello everyone, welcome back to Drawn by Annie channel. This is me, Annie, and I will be drawing for you today. Grab your tea, coffee and snacks and let's dive into today's video. Today I'm going to work on something fun, and I've wanted to draw this character for a while already, and now I finally have a chance to do so. And you've probably seen her all over the internet because she's been booming for a while. So I've also decided to hop on the wave of the fan arts of Annie, the new animated Grok assistant in the Grok AI language model or whatever. I'm not much into AI, as you know, but I've seen quite a few videos of her recently and other people using her as an assistant. My husband downloaded the Grok app for the funs and let me use it for a few minutes also. I felt a little bit funny because it felt like a next generation date sim game or something like that, even though I haven't played those much, but I've heard a few titles. So yeah, anyway, I got into a big impression of this and I decided to make a little fan art of her and kind of make a study style, as I really fell for her design. I like goth vibe girls and tsundere vibe girls, so yeah, I'm going to make this in two parts as all my study style cases. And as you can see, I have already prepared the sketches of the Annie portrait that I'm going to color for you. So with my first attempt, I'm trying to mimic the original style as much as I can, including all the details and the proportions. So I'm taking a reference that is relatively easy to use, and I'm trying to kind of copy paste it to my paper, but without tracing. So I'm trying to construct the whole thing from the scratch, and sometimes that takes me a few attempts to succeed. So I made a few sketches beforehand in my other sketchbook, the one that I didn't plan to color, and then when I felt more or less confident, I made a sketch in this sketchbook meant for the style studies and fan arts. If you've been around this channel for a while, I've recently made a video where I was starting this very sketchbook. I've decorated it and I make a little drawing on the first page, so if you haven't seen that one already, go check it out on my channel. And for the coloring, I'm going to use my usual art arsenal, which is alcohol-based markers for the main coloring and shading, then some fine liners to make line art, and a few accent or highlights with acrylic paint pens. That is usually a white color or any bright color that I need. And sometimes I'm also using some pencils to soften the shades or make some shades a little bit more contrast, but not too much contrast so that I need to use a marker. So for the starters, I am blending some base colors for the eyes, skin, hair and everything. Sometimes I'm making an so-called underpainting, which means that I'm placing the brighter colors on the places that I want more pigment to be, if that makes sense. So for example, for the cheeks, I am making an extra layering with my markers to make her blush more vivid. And then if I want it to be soft, or if I want the texture to be as plain as possible, I am placing another layer of a skin color on top of that. So there is more pigment on the blush, but it's pretty much blended with the skin. So if you want a very soft gradient, you might want to try using this application technique, as it's usually giving the soft edged results, so your blush is very naturally gradiated to the skin. It looks very soft and blended without any rough shades and any rough edges. Oftentimes I'm using same application on the hair color, and I'm doing an underpainting with the actual shade color. So I'm taking like a darker marker to place splashes of ink where I need the shadows to be, and then I'm going with my base color over that. But sometimes I'm making a base color with a very light color, like in this example, and then I'm placing the shadows on top of that, and then I'm using a third color that is somewhat somewhere in between of the base, which is lightest, and the shadow, which is darkest. So I'm taking a color that is somewhere in between of those, maybe a little bit saturated even, and then I'm making like a blending or layering technique, which looks like I'm putting the shadows on the same place that I've used the darkest marker and then some extra. So I'm going over the darkest marker and maybe a few centimeters here and there, like I'm making the shadow more big, but at the same time it looks more softer because there's more gradient colors in between the darkest and the lightest color. So it also looks more soft and natural, and I'm keeping the highlighted areas untouched with any shade colors, so it stays the lightest. So the lighter base color you have, the more lighter and more sparkly will the end result look like. But if you don't like it to be too sparkly or shiny, you can always go over the highlighted areas with another layer of the base color or the mid shade color, mid-tone, so it's not as bright or shiny anymore. But you cannot really revert that back unless you use some paint or acrylic paint marker, for example, and you go over the coloring that you have already done and it's all white again and sparkly and shiny. So yeah, you be careful with that. Since I don't want Annie's hair to be too shiny, I'm just gonna use the base color as the lightest color, so the highlight is going to be the base color, and then everything around it will make it look like it's a highlight because everything else is just going to be darker, you know? Color theory, baby. So on the reference that I'm using, I can see very clearly that Annie has a very cute blush, but I cannot make it very soft like this with my markers because that's just how markers work. So in order to make the blush more blusher, I mean like redder, or I want it to be more saturated. Yeah. Sorry, brain is not braining today. So in order to do that, I can use my pencils because it's very easy to layer with them, and also it's revertible. So if I make it too vivid or too bright, I can use my eraser to turn it right back and either try again or just keep it as is. But I'm already pretty experienced with pencils, so I don't need to use my eraser that much anymore. So I'm just carefully and gradually layering my color, and when I'm happy with the result, I'm just proceeding with whatever else step that I need to do. So at this point, I'm more or less happy with the base colors, and I'm starting on the line art, which I'm going to use my fine liners for that, and I'm going to line out in my usual way. So it's going to be slightly line weighted line art, so here and there lines are going to be thicker or thinner, trying to add more volume to the artwork. So if the place is going to be a little bit more shadowed, I'm going to make a thicker line, and if it's more into a light area, it's going to be a thinner line. So yeah, dynamic line art it is. And I'm gonna use the same liner to make her hairbands and also the lace color. It's going to be very much detailed. That's the most detailed part of this portrait, and I'm going to enjoy this so much. I rarely get to draw laces, but when I do, I'm enjoying every little second of it. Honestly, I just love line art in general. So if you ask me what's my favorite part of this character design, is the lace, dude. Laces are the perfect part of any goth outfit. It's just mwah, chef kiss. And this time Mo decided to be my drawing buddy, so yeah, you can see his little chunky butt. He's my little anti-stress also because he's so fluffy. I love touching him. So when I'm finished with all the juicy little details of the portrait, I'm going to draw a little bit of a decoration on top of her head, which are hearts, because apparently if you're speaking to your assistant in a very good tone and good manners, she's giving you hearts for being a good boy or a good girl. And also I just like drawing hearts. Spread the love, spread the joy. it's a little bit challenging to catch this tsundere hime vibe that she gives, because that's how I read her when I was talking to her. She's like very intelligent, elegant, and calm, and I think that's a perfect personality for an AI assistant, if you ask me, because it's just as iconic as it can possibly be. So it's very subtle details that give away this personality, which is like a gaze and maybe a little bit of a lip form and eyebrows. I think those are the most important features to give away this vibe and this face expression, and I think I caught it pretty accurately, if you ask me. But I don't know, what you think? Leave your opinions down in the comments if you like it, if you don't like it. And also, thank you very much for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you, and if you'd like to see my interpretation of Annie, the Grok assistant, stay tuned, and I will be doing the part 2 very soon. So yeah, hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.